731 pence. Tell me this, do you think that is too much money, just shy of £93,000? Too much or too little? Does it encourage the right calibre of MPs to join our politics or not? And speaking of politics, do you remember the new immigration policy, which would basically mean that £38,700 would be what you have to earn if you want to bring your loved ones to the country, if you want to come and live here? Looks now, though, like legal action will be taken against that policy by people claiming it's cruel. Is it? I also want to talk to you about so-called non-suspicion stop and search. Section 60. Should this practice be banned, or is it an essential tool to help us keep people safe? Yeah, I'm going to have some robust debate on all of those topics. Ben Habib and Dr. Richard Johnson keeping me company tonight. But before we get stuck in, let's cross live for tonight's latest headlines.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A body that was found in the River Wensum in Norwich has been formally identified. 55-year-old Gaynor Lord disappeared after leaving work in the city centre on the 8th of December. Police say the cause of death appears to be consistent with drowning, and there are no indications of any third-party involvement. Russell Brand has been questioned by police a second time over alleged sexual offences. The actor and comedian was interviewed under caution last week over 6 allegations after being questioned last month over 3 other claims. The 48-year-old has been accused of rape, assault and emotional abuse between 2006 and 2013, following a joint investigation by the Sunday Times, The Times and Channel 4 dispatches. He strongly denies the claims. Baroness Michelle Mone has hit out at the Prime Minister after he said he takes the scandal surrounding her involvement with a PPE firm incredibly seriously. It's after she admitted she's set to benefit from a contract between PPE firm MedPro and the government, which generated a £60 million profit. Posting on social media, Lady Mone said, "I was honest with the Cabinet Office and the NHS in my dealings with them." Yesterday, she told the BBC she contacted Michael Gove at the start of the pandemic after he made a call to arms for massive quantities of personal protective equipment. Rishi Sunak says the government has launched a legal case against the company.
This whole situation is subject to an ongoing criminal investigation, but also the government is taking action, legal action against the company involved. So there's a limit to what I can say, other than to say we take all these things incredibly seriously, and that's why the government's taking legal action, and because there's a criminal investigation ongoing, I can't comment any further.
Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer described the scandal as a shocking disgrace from top to bottom.
Every day goes past, there are more questions that need to be answered. There's now suggestions there was early private contact with members of the Cabinet that may have started this unhappy story in the first place. So the government needs to come clean, needs to make a statement about that. But this needs to be seen in its context. Under this government, £7 billion was lost in fraud during COVID. That's taxpayers' money, and if there were a Labour government, we'd want that money back.
Junior doctors in Wales will stage a 72-hour strike in the new year. They'll walk out from January the 15th after voting overwhelmingly in favour of industrial action in a dispute over pay. That's as the government and British Medical Association reached an agreement on reforms for specialist doctors. The offer, which will be put to members, proposes an additional pay rise of between 6.1% and 9.22%. Meanwhile, Labour is calling on the government to fund more overtime for doctors and nurses to help clear the NHS backlog. Sir Keir Starmer says his party would end the non-dom tax status as a way to fund it if it wins the next general election. During a hospital visit in Leeds, the Labour leader also promised a reduction in wait times for NHS appointments. 2 men have been arrested by counter-terror police after a ULEZ camera was damaged in a blast. Met Police says a low-sophistication improvised explosive device was used in south-east London on the 6th of December. No one was injured when the IED was detonated in Sidcup, but vehicles and a residential property were damaged. Police say a 6-year-old man from the area is being questioned, along with a 61-year-old who was arrested in Horsham in West Sussex. BP has paused oil shipments through the Red Sea because of the deteriorating security situation there. Houthi rebels have been targeting vessels, launching drone attacks over the past week. The pro-Hamas group says it's trying to disrupt ships travelling to Israel. A number of other firms, including Maersk, have also suspended traffic through the region. A new menopause drug to treat hot flushes has been given the green light in the UK. The daily pill, called Veoza, alleviates symptoms by regulating body temperature. Up to 80% of women going through the menopause are affected by the symptoms, which also include disruptive sleep patterns, changes to their mood and energy levels. This is GB News across the UK, on TV, in your car, on your digital radio and on your smart speaker by saying play GB News. Now it's back to Michelle.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. So alongside me, I've got a corker of a panel, if I say so myself. The Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, alongside me, as is Senior Lecturer at Queen Mary University, Richard Johnson. Not just any lecturer, senior lecturer.
I'm getting on in age.
That's what we like. That's what we like on Dewbs and Co. Right, so you know the drill, don't you? It's not just about us three. It is very much about you guys at home as well. What is on your mind tonight? GB Views at gbnews.com is how you reach me, or you can tweet me at GB News. Were you paying attention to my intro? Because I mentioned, didn't I, the MP is getting a potential pay rise of 7.1%. I said to you, didn't I, 92,731. I'm sure I said pence in the intro. I didn't mean pence, obviously. I meant pounds. But just shy of £93,000. That is what has got you guys talking tonight. Do you think that's a fair salary for MPs? Too much, too little, or what? One of my viewers, Paddy, says they should be paid £500,000 per year. And that way we might get some quality in Parliament, they say. Richard says double their wages, but half the number of MPs. So I'll be coming on to that conversation shortly. But for now, get your thoughts on that topic and the rest coming in. I want to talk to you, though, tonight about a lady that's very much been in the headlines today, Michelle Mone, of course. She has been under fire. You'll be familiar with the story by now. This is all about the procurement of PPE contracts during COVID, the so-called VIP lanes, etc. You might have seen the YouTube documentary that was put out. Documentary, analysis, investigation, call it what you will. Also, of course, there was the interview as well at the weekend, wasn't there? Lots of people speaking out. Keir Starmer saying that she now shouldn't be in the House of Lords. Let's take a listen to that. Oh, well, whilst we're waiting for Keir Starmer and what his hot take is on the matter, Ben Habib, what do you make to it?
Of Michelle Mone?
Yes.
Well, I think she's entirely discredited herself. You know, anyone who lies for any reason whatsoever can never be trusted again, because the next time they open their mouth, you don't know whether they're telling you the truth or a lie. So fundamentally, she's undermined her position both in the House of Lords as well as in society, with her own family and with, frankly, anyone who interviews her on any subject. But as to the point about, you know, whether she should lose her peerage or not, I think there's another peer in the House of Lords who has some questions to answer about lobbying that he was doing during the pandemic on related but very similar kind of issue, you know, for the provision of coronavirus loans to Greensill, a company of which he was a director and from which he would have benefited greatly if those loans had been made. And an activity, lobbying, as a former Prime Minister, an activity that he had said himself
He's talking about
was
David
unacceptable.
Cameron,
Well,
by the way,
I want to see if viewers know who I'm talking about. But this man has just been elevated, having been castigated during the Greensill scandal, for want of a better word. He's been elevated to the House of Lords, put above the MPs, and given one of the highest offices in the country. So when Sunak says he takes Michelle Mone incredibly seriously, I have to doubt him. Why would you elevate David Cameron to the House of Lords when he himself has some really serious questions to answer about his behaviour during lockdowns? And this is symptomatic of the Conservative Party. Michelle Mone is one example. I think Matt Hancock had a shareholding in a company that was providing PPE. Perhaps Richard knows more detail about that than I do. But they're all seemingly at it. And but should Michelle Mone lose her peerage? I don't think we'll see her in the House of Lords again. I think shame will prohibit her from visiting that.
You say Rishi Sunak takes Michelle Mone seriously. What you're meaning there is he apparently is saying that he takes this scandal seriously. Michelle Mone basically responded and hit back on Twitter to that, saying, what is Rishi Sunak even talking about? I was honest with the Cabinet Office, the government and the NHS in my dealings with them. They all knew about my involvement from the very beginning. She's been very active on Twitter today. She's saying things like, does Rishi Sunak stand to profit from the Moderna COVID vaccine during the pandemic?
You can't believe the things she says now, Michelle.
It goes. Let's listen to Keir Starmer, though. Let's, because to your point there, let's listen.
I think this is a shocking disgrace from top to bottom. But this needs to be seen in its context. Under this government, £7 billion was lost in fraud during COVID. I don't think she should be in the Lords. I think the government should be held to account for this. Who started the conversations with her in the first place is a question that the government now needs to answer.
Well, there you go. Richard, your thoughts?
Well, I think that the words that Clement Attlee said to the academic Harold Lasky, a period of silence on your part would be welcome, is one that I think should apply to Michelle Mone. I thought her interview was pretty politically catastrophic. In terms of the substantive points, I mean, I think there are two issues here. One is about what happened during COVID in terms of procurement and government contracts. And to take the sympathetic side for one moment, the government was faced with the choice between speed and due diligence. Now, it should try to do as much due diligence as it can in that question of speed. But if we had a system that had so much red tape that the government wasn't acting quick enough, we'd also have criticism of the government there. That's the kind of thing that the COVID inquiry really should be unpicking. It's not clear to me that that's exactly really what the COVID inquiry is focusing on, but if it was doing a good job, that's the kind of thing it would look at. As for Michelle Mone's case, should she be in the Lords or not, it's interesting to me how our standards have changed, perhaps in a way for the better, a stronger sense of standards. Back in 2009, there was the cash for influence scandal in the House of Lords with Lord Taylor of Blackburn and Lord Truscott, who were accused in the case of Lord Taylor of, this was a sting from the Sunday Times, but soliciting £100,000 to ask questions in the House of Lords, and Lord Truscott was accused of soliciting £70,000 to ease the way for lobbyists. Now, in that case, those two members of the House of Lords were only suspended for 6 months and then went back to their jobs. Lord Truscott is still a member of the House of Lords today. Lord Taylor has passed away. And even in 2009, you had peers saying that was too harsh a punishment. They should be allowed to attend but not speak was the argument. So our standards have changed. We're a bit tougher now on our politicians, probably as a result of those kind of expenses, scandals, and maybe that's not so bad a thing.
Well, Michelle Mone apparently made $66 million. It leaves 100,000 looking, you know, decidedly unambitious.
Hold on, because she would say that she didn't make... I mean, there's no flies on me. I've watched the documentary and the interview. Yeah. She would say, if she was sitting here today, that she didn't directly make anything at all. This trust that was set up, which is in her husband's name, got around about 60 million quid, and she indirectly, if he passes away or gets divorced or whatever it was, she would then indirectly benefit. That's what she would say if she was here.
Do you believe her, Michelle? Because she has admitted she's a liar. Do you believe that declaration?
Well, I don't know the ins and outs of the formations that she's got set up and the financial affairs and all the rest of it. Somebody needs to be asking some serious questions to get to the bottom of that. But at the end of the day, you know, people do make profit in business.
Oh, absolutely.
And people made an astronomical amount of profit off the back of COVID. So, for example, I cannot help but think of companies like Pfizer. I mean, the billions that they made in profit off the back of the vaccine, and I am not suggesting wrongdoing before anyone gets upset. I'm merely suggesting that there were a lot of people, testing companies. You had so many people that were making a small fortune. So then for me, there is a question of, is it immoral to make profit off a problem?
Well, I don't think making profit is immoral. If you're profiteering at the expense, dramatic expense of a vulnerable entity, in this case the British state, during a time of need, then you've got to do some very serious introspection about your own moral compass. But Michelle Mone denied the fact that she had any relationship with MedPro, that her husband had any relationship with MedPro. And that's my problem with Michelle Mone, is she has now admitted that she lied. So you can't believe anything else she says. And I just want to come back to the point that actually Keir Starmer made. Sorry, I was going to attribute it to you, Richard. But he made a very good point, which I'd forgotten, that Lord Agnew resigned.
He did.
As a Minister of the Treasury in early 2022 because of the obvious fraudulent abuse of the coronavirus loan scheme.
He was calling it like schoolboy errors and stuff like that, he was saying about, and the ineffectiveness and the seeming lack of appetite to try and kind of get on top of that.
And can I just say one more thing before we go?
Go on. It's not before we go, before we bring Richard back in.
We keep hearing Jeremy Hunt hasn't got enough latitude to make tax cuts. But they spend money like Billio, like it's being printed. I mean, they do actually print it just for the sake of spending it. But, you know, 500 million to the French for not doing the borders, another 200 million last year, 300 million to Rwanda, billions in COP28. And I could go on and on.
It could go on and on. We'd still be sitting here at 7:15 with him reeling out all of the spending. But anyway, Richard...
Just to say quickly, I mean, the reality is that in Michelle Mone's particular case, her credibility is shot. And traditionally, the House of Lords was a self-regulating body. Before the 2009 scandal, I believe the last time that a member of the House of Lords was suspended was during the English Civil War. And so normally it was seen that members of the House of Lords had a bit of self-respect and dignity and would remove themselves from proceedings. Now, one would say she has taken a leave of absence from the House of Lords. She may want to consider making that a permanent leave of absence. That is now a reform of the House of Lords that's happened in the last decade or so, when people can actually just leave. Before, once you're in, it's like Hotel California, once you were in, you could never leave. Now you can, and I think she should consider her position.
But if you felt that you'd done nothing wrong, I'm playing devil's advocate, putting the other side, if you was Michelle Mone, you felt you'd done nothing wrong, and you were determined to, I mean, because I'm looking at her social media and all the rest of it, and she's really kind of going for it. She's decided, after years of being silent, she's decided the woman is silent no more. So she obviously thinks she's innocent, she wants to clear her name, so she'll be sitting there thinking, well, why should I resign?
I mean, if she genuinely believes and knows that she did nothing wrong, and she feels that her name can be truly vindicated, then that might be a consideration. But on the other hand, I think kind of hanging around, I thought the way that she conducted the interview over the weekend, you know, her defiance bordered on having a clothier really is not beneficial to her reputation. It's certainly not beneficial to the reputation of the upper chamber as well.
Well, I'll give you guys the final say on that. If you were accused, by the way, though, of making all this money from the taxpayer, would you do documentaries, PR interviews, whatever people want to call them, dressed head to toe in designer gear in a huge mansion? I don't know, sometimes I think people do it, perhaps help themselves. Anyway, look, speaking of the House of Lords, get this, everyone, they could see their daily allowance rise from £342 to £366, these peers, if their planned 7.1% pay rises go ahead. MPs potentially getting a 93% pay rise, chance would be a fine thing, a £93,000 pay after their 70... You know what? I'm just asking a simple question. Do MPs get paid enough? Do they need more? If so, how much more? And also, if Keir Starmer gets elected, do you think that the UK is going to be like Venezuela, basically, for 20 years? Really? You tell me.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, thank you for being a big part of GB News.
We'd like to wish you and your loved ones a Christmas season full of comfort and joy,
as well as a peaceful and prosperous new year.
From our family
to yours.
We are proud to be your channel.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
Here on GB News,
the People's Channel.
Merry Christmas.
Oh yes, Merry Christmas. I'm in the Christmas spirit. Are you? Are you excited about the festive season or not? I am Michelle Dewberry with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Deputy Leader of the Reform UK Party, Ben Habib, alongside me and Senior Lecturer at Queen Mary University, Richard Johnson. Lots I want to get into with you guys tonight. I also imminently, this is the thing that you guys really are getting in touch with me tonight. MP's pay, do you think it should be increased now? 7.1% is the figure. It would take their salary up to just shy of £93,000. Good value, enough money, not enough? You get in touch and you tell me. You're not holding back, I can tell you. I'll come to that in a second. But speaking about Michelle Mone, basically, Yvonne says perhaps it's time basically to get rid of the whole House of Lords. Really? Off the back of Michelle Mone? Really? And what would your second chamber be? Get in touch, Yvonne, and tell me. John says basically the government have panicked. They just bought stuff willy-nilly. She was just there and she took advantage. The face of VIP greed, says Richard. Sack her. I doubt she will be the last. David says there's many peers who are corrupt. Oh, not much love for the House of Lords. Now, I can tell you, Jordan Peterson, many of you will be familiar with him. I quite like him, I've got to confess. If you're not familiar with him, you're thinking who's she talking about? It's the Canadian psychologist. Very high profile in this country, I have to say. Anyway, he's been speaking out. He did an interview with The Telegraph, and he's basically saying if we elect Keir Starmer in the next election, Britain basically will be on track to be Venezuela for the next 20 years. You know a thing or two about the Labour Party. In fact, you've got a book coming out imminently about the Labour Party. What do you think to this suggestion?
I thought these comments were absurd. And, I mean, if you look at Keir Starmer is trying to approximate as close as he can the playbook of the New Labour years and Tony Blair. He won't even touch policies that Ed Miliband was willing to entertain, like a mansion tax. His thoughts on the top rate of tax is not to even restore it to what it was under Gordon Brown, or to explore reintroducing a banker's bonus tax. The idea that Keir Starmer is some kind of far-left leader is for the birds. He's a pretty moderate social democrat at best, and he's imposing on his shadow cabinet very strict spending rules through his shadow chancellor, Rachel Reeves. And so this is not going to be a particularly economically radical government. And I think that this, whatever Jordan Peterson might know about psychology, I think it shows he doesn't know a great deal about British politics.
Ooh, harsh. Do you agree with him, Ben?
Well, I don't, I'm afraid. I think Richard is an incredibly cerebral and well-articulated young man, but I think you're completely wrong about Keir Starmer, because Keir Starmer is... he has no yardsticks by which he is but ideologically driven. Keir Starmer is reacting, just like Rishi Sunak, to every 24-hour news cycle in order to try and promote his own popularity. And I would say the only criticism I've got of Jordan Peterson is that he thinks that we need a Labour Party in order for the country to become like Venezuela. Actually, the Tories have done unbelievable damage in the last 13 years. Look at the symptoms of socialism. What are they? They are very large state borrowing, we've got that. Very high taxes, we've got that, post-World War II high. Inflation out of control, where we kind of had that. An economy that isn't growing. Our economy isn't growing. On a GDP per capita basis, it's actually shrinking. A nation-state in turmoil, public sector not working, the labour market's broken, 6 million people unemployed on benefits. What we've had since Tony Blair took office is 25 years of progressive socialism, hollowing out the nation-state, not making policies for British national interest, not promoting aspiration over dependency, and instead going for wealth redistribution over wealth creation. We've had 25 years of it. And most of government spending has been sustained through borrowing. So now, for example, we spend twice as much on serving our government's interest bill than we do on our military defence spending. This country is careering into an existential threat, which is going to result in the end, as Suella Braverman put it, of the United Kingdom. We're already heading in that direction. We need a significant change in economic, social, cultural policy from the government if we are to save the United Kingdom. And there's only one party that can deliver that, and that is Reform UK.
Oh, he gets it in there, his plug. Go on, Richard.
Very good. Look, the reality is that what we have had since, actually, even before the 90s, I'd say going back since the 70s, is a series of governments that aren't willing to take industrial strategy seriously. And actually, one of the benefits of leaving the European Union is that the tools of making industrial strategy now rest with the British government. And my encouragement to Keir Starmer would be to be bolder on those issues. And what that means, really, is for Keir Starmer to think about how to use public procurement in a way that promotes economic growth in different parts of the country, perhaps providing tax incentives for businesses to expand or invest in, say, the Wirral or Doncaster rather than clumping in the southeast. If you get that kind of industrial strategy correct, you will not only help to resolve some of the cost of living and living standards crisis that we face in this country, but also the housing crisis, because part of the problem we have is that the southeast's housing crisis is the flip side of the rest of the country's jobs crisis. And if you get good, stable and attractive employment outside of the southeast, then that will help to rebalance the economy. But you need an active government to do that.
Do you think we've got an active government? You tell me at home. Do we need a pay rise for MPs? Is that the thing that we need to fix some of the words in this country right? Get this, everybody. It's been suggested today that MPs could potentially get a 7.1% pay rise. That would see them. Are you sitting down? Are you sitting comfortably, everyone? It could push their earnings up. Are you ready? £92,731. Lords, we were talking about Michelle Mone earlier on. Those guys could see their daily allowance rise from 342 quid to 366. What do you make to this?
Well, just coming back to one of the emails that you got at the outset, which you read at the outset of the show, about someone would double the salaries of MPs, so we got good MPs. In principle, I agree with that. If you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. And at the moment, we have a parliament infested with monkeys. But When you've got monkeys, what you don't do is give them a stonking wage rise. And I did a quick...
80-odd grand a year isn't peanuts.
I did it...
Is it?
What?
The salary that MPs...
No, I was talking about the
peanuts.
principle. I was talking about the principle of doubling salaries in order to attract really high-caliber people. But I did a quick bit of Googling before I came on. In 2010, the average MP salary was £67,000 a year. The average salary now is going to be £92,000. That's a 41% increase in wages since 2010, since this Conservative government came to office. A Band 5 nurse wages has gone up from £27,000 to £35,000. That's a 25% increase. So the MPs are way ahead of a Band 5 nurse is a nurse who's had 7 years' experience. And so experienced nurses have had much less increment in their wages than the bunch of monkeys who've delivered this country to the point of existential threat that we were discussing in the last segment. And I wouldn't give this lot a penny in pay rise. I would eject all of them from Parliament.
But hang on, because I don't mean to be rude, but you ran for election.
Yeah.
So then if you was elected, you would be part of this kind of monkey, low-rent
Well, I would be the exception.
Suggesting.
I would be the exception.
They all say that, and trust me.
Richard, where are you on it?
I mean, I don't think that MPs need a pay increase, and I very much sympathise with the point that we've had a cost of living crisis where wages have stagnated for the rest of the country. But there are two issues here. So one is that the reason this is happening is because MPs have tied their own hands on this. After the expenses scandal, they set up IPSA, which sets the salaries for MPs, and so in effect this was meant to depoliticise MPs' pay. It's not actually resolved that issue at all, and so I think maybe they need to think about whether the system they set up works. The second thing I'd say is that while I don't think MPs need to be paid more, I think that their staff should be paid more, and I think MPs should have more staff. If we look at other legislatures around the world, our MPs' offices are quite small in terms of the number of staff they have, and the staff who are working, including for MPs both in their constituencies and in London, are actually quite poorly paid. And that means people don't stay in those roles, people don't build experience, and it's usually just I mean, there are some people who do stay, but it's in spite of the pay, not because of it. And they're the people who actually serve the constituents.
Well, it can't be that bad, because it used to be the case that so many people that were elected, you know, they couldn't wait to get their families in there, in some of these jobs and all the rest of it. So it can't be as bad.
They used to employ their wives and their sisters and their nieces.
Yeah, but also they would often say that was because they were, for example, their spouses were the only people who would be willing to work for those hours on that pay.
That's a bit convenient.
Do you agree with that?
No, I don't. I don't think it's right. That kind of nepotism just never comes
I'm not
across
defending that
yeah.
system, but what I'm saying is if you don't pay MP staff properly, then that's the kind of incentive that's created.
What about doubling MPs' pay and halving the number of them?
I would disagree with that as well. I think it's good that we actually have compared to... Let's take an example. The US House of Representatives has 435 members. That means that each member of Congress represents a district of about 800,000 constituents. Our MPs represent about 80,000 of us. And that, I think, is good, because that means that MPs can feasibly get around their constituency, can meet a larger proportion of the people they represent. If you represent 800,000 people, the only way that you really can communicate with your voters is through television and through paid advertising, because it's impossible for a single individual or even a small team around them to get around that number of people.
I want to bring you guys into this conversation. So many of you tonight have been in touch with me on this one. Ken says, yes, sure, increase their pay considerably, but scrap their perks and expenses. Peter says, pay MPs on achievement only. He says, no salary at all, but incentivise them instead on their achievements. He says also, well, you're right, half the number of MPs and scrap the House of Lords. Well, you're certainly radical in your thoughts. I will give you that. And sometimes what we need is indeed radical thinking, but is that the solution? Performance-related pay for MPs. Tina, again, give them the pay rise, but get rid of all of their allowances. Nikki says, why is no one focusing on their massive pensions that they get? They do not need a pay rise. You guys have got a lot to say on that topic, I can tell you. I'll bring you in again after the break, but I also want to ask you, what do you think to this proposed now new rule where £38,700, that's what you'd have to earn if you want to come and live here and bring your loved one? Is it fair, harsh or cruel? You tell me.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Flights.
Hi there, Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Ben Habib remains alongside me, as does Richard Johnson. You guys are really talking tonight about the MPs' potential pay rise, taking them up to just shy of 93 grand a year, Eric says. If you're going to start tweaking things, can we suggest a rule that no MP should be allowed in under the age of 45? What do you think to that? He's saying you should have experienced life and have achievements and all the rest of it under your belt before you get in. Lots of people are saying this suggestion as well. Performance-related pay, that is coming through thick and fast. But what about the fact that essentially they could lose their job in 5 years' time if they don't do a good job? Is that enough for you or not? If not, then tell me, what would you do? How would you measure them? Who would get to decide what those kind of yardsticks would look like? Get in touch and give me your thoughts on that. Now, as I speak, there is a protest taking place. Let's be honest, when is there not a protest these days about something? Anyway, this one is outside of the Home Office. Stop the Hate protest, apparently it's called, arguing that apparently the immigration rhetoric in this country is too hateful. Is it? One of the reasons that they're talking about this is because you'll be familiar now with the fact that if you want to bring your loved ones into the country, you'd have to be earning £38,700. Is this cruel or is it fair?
It's absolutely right. It's a basic minimum. Why should you be entitled to bring your loved one to the United Kingdom? Because you seek work here. If you seek work here and you know that you're not entitled to bring your loved one, well, you make that decision knowing what the outcome is going to be. There are thousands, millions of people across the globe who emigrate purely for work, leave their entire family where it is they emigrated from, and send money back to their family. it's their choice. We've got to stop infantilizing people. We've got to allow people to make their own decisions. If they choose to come to this country, and these are our rules, and they're made for very good reason, because we've got pressure on our infrastructure, we've got difficulties providing medical care, education, housing, all the rest of it, why should we somehow bend over backwards to welcome their loved ones? It's their choice. They don't have to come and work here.
What about if you made that choice with the rules as they was now, and now you've got this new higher earnings limit and your visa's perhaps up for renewal again, because there's still a question mark about whether or not those people would be impacted by this?
Well, if your visa's up for renewal, then you're subject to the new rules, and you would have to either go home and be with the one you love, or stay here and continue to earn the wages that you were earning. But I don't think this rule applies to people who are already here under an existing regime. It's only for new visas or potentially for renewal of visas.
So it's basically a choice, says Ben Habib. Do you agree?
Well, I think there's been a peculiar kind of British exceptionalism in the discussion about requirements for spousal visas. It's very common around the world for countries to set some kind of set of restrictions, often to do with the earnings. If you're a non-EU citizen moving to Germany, there are salary restrictions. If you move to Australia or Canada or the United States, there are salary restrictions. Other countries put all kinds of extra restrictions that we don't. Denmark, there are integration requirements, Danish language requirements. You have to sign a form saying you'll raise your children speaking the Danish language.
Good for the Danes.
Yeah,
good for the Danes.
So I'm just putting this in comparative perspective and just saying that it's not unusual for countries to say there is a salary threshold for spouses. Now, the next question is, should the government have the right to set that? Because at the moment we're hearing campaigners and charities taking this to the European Court of Human Rights to say that the government should not be allowed to set this. I think that's probably incorrect. But then the question is, on this specific threshold, is the amount too high? And that's a political question. But I think that if I'm to read the politics of this to a certain extent, it seems to me that the government was recently stung by these record high net immigration figures. And this is a way for the government to look like it's acting tough and sounding tough. And it will be tough in some circumstances. But there are also huge exemptions that the government is likely to carve out of the final programme here. And so whether this actually makes that much of a difference in the overall numbers is quite a different matter. And so again, this I think could be rather performative of this government, which would sum up, I think, its general approach to immigration policy.
Well, if they do push ahead with these legal challenges, of course, it will be that sentence that you hear often about the right to family life from the ECHR. Potentially there'll be exploration under that about whether or not
that's extraordinary.
This conforms.
That is extraordinary. That people can even think this is a breach of human rights. It's entirely within the individual's decision-making power to decide not to come to the United Kingdom, to stay with their loved ones. It's not an inalienable human right to come to the United Kingdom and work here. That's a choice. And if you make that choice, you have to live with our rules, I'm afraid. But you made a very good point in the previous segment on levelling up strategy, an industrial strategy that the government needs to have, tax breaks perhaps for areas which need tax breaks to attract investment. The same applies to the labour market. We don't have joined-up thinking on the labour market. The median wage in this country is £33,000, £34,000 a year. The fact that the minimum wage to get a visa was struck at £26,000 a year, 25% below the median wage, was undermining the British worker, was putting the British worker into competition with cheap, unskilled imports. That is no way to promote British national interest.
And that's one of the things that's really struck me as odd, because one of the key things that Labour said as well, in terms of skills shortage list, when you can hire people at a discounted rate, Labour came straight out, didn't they, say would immediately get rid of that, which I've never really understood. Why would Tories have had it as a policy for such a long time? Anyway, what do you make to it all? Our immigration policy, is it inhumane? Is it cruel? Or is it basically a choice? And if you like it, come, and if you don't, don't. Where do you stand on it all? Get in touch and let me know. After the break, I want to talk to you about the use of stop and search without suspicion, Section 60, to give it its title. Do you think basically it's time to do away with that practice? Is it discriminating against people, or is it basically trying to keep us all safe? You tell me.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
There's only 3 people you can trust in life. Your doctor, your lawyer and your nana.
I'm not sure.
So join me, Nana Aquare, at 3 p.m. every Saturday and Sunday, where we discuss the biggest topics of the weekend. Be ready for battle.
Could you be quiet? What is this? It's my new teeth.
It's your new teeth. I don't bite. Well, not without a good reason. Always honest, always fun. Every weekend at 3 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, Michelle Dewberry till 7, Deputy Leader of Reform UK, Ben Habib, alongside me, Senior Lecturer at Queen Mary University, Richard Johnson there too. Tony says, Michelle, my grandson has fallen in love with a Brazilian girl and they plan to marry next year. This salary increase, the immigration policy, could mean that their lives together would be ruined.
I don't think that's right. If her son is a British citizen and he marries a Brazilian girl, I think she'd have a right to British passport, wouldn't she? As his spouse?
Well, no, this is the point, isn't it? If you're not... Well, yeah, actually, I hear what you're saying. If you live here already...
Yeah,
well, there you go. You see, these are all the kind of technicalities that need to be ironed out. Marlena says, what a fantastic panel you've got tonight. She says, the UK is my country. She says, but I have to say, I cannot believe how much it has changed. She goes on to say it's so sad and tragic. Do you agree with that synopsis? Let me know. Let's talk stop and search, though, shall we? Because a police watchdog now has basically refused to back the use of what they call Section 60, basically. Other people call it kind of non-suspicion stop and search. A lot of people are saying that it basically discriminates against black people because apparently black people were 12 times more likely to be stopped and searched without suspicion. What do you think to that, Ben? Do we need to scrap these Section 60s?
I mean, my being is against, you know, authoritarian kind of approach to any form of governance, including law enforcement. But I think on this one issue, we've seen crime rise so dramatically across the United Kingdom, particularly in urban areas, and violent crime, knife crime, grievous bodily harm and so on, burglaries. I do think that there is place now for the police to actually have the right and they should be supported in it to stop people. I mean, no policeman's actually going to stop you unless they've got a suspicion. They're stopping you because they think there's something going on, or you're in the vicinity of a crime that's just taken place.
Section 60 authorises police to stop and search people and vehicles without suspicion for offensive weapons or instruments considered dangerous in a specific neighbourhood for a set period. Where are you on it?
Yes, and I think this is the key thing, that this Section 60 is from legislation from 1994, which was designed really to address a specific issue about raves and parties and large gatherings. And there's concern that this power has now extended much further. I mean, there's one thing, there's a difference, I think, between if police are in pursuit of suspected criminal after there's been some kind of mugging or serious crime, and someone fits that profile, it seems reasonable that they should be able to stop and search someone who fits that profile. But when it becomes a much greater blanket approach, in effect a kind of citizen shakedown, then that, I think, can raise some serious concerns, particularly as we know that in this country, as in other countries, but in this country historically, going back to the early 80s with the Brixton riots and Toxteth, that there was a sense that this kind of authority for the police could be abused. So when it's used, it has to be, I think, in a much clearer and targeted way. And part of the problem is they're using legislation that wasn't really intended for this purpose. And so if they want to keep using this power, I think the legislation should be clarified.
I must say that, when you hear about all the knife crimes and stuff like that go on in this country, then I do actually support the concept of stopping and searching people. But I have seen it happen quite a lot. And I always feel like quite sorry for the person that's been stopped and searched, in the respect of there's no real dignity around this.
No,
it happens in front of absolutely everyone. And if I put myself into that position, I was just wandering around minding my own business, and then this copper just grabbed hold of me in front of everybody. Like, I can't even cope when, you go through the airport and someone stops you and they start rummaging through your suitcase in front of everyone. I find that mortifying and a breach of my privacy. So to have that happen to me, when I know that I've done nothing wrong, but I just happen to, I don't know, have blonde hair or be white or whatever the profile is of what they're looking for. So there must be better, more respectful ways of doing it.
Well, I mean, the whole issue of why crime is increased needs to have a holistic analysis and response to it. We tend to knee-jerk reaction and kind of come up with dictatorial responses on the whole, which is why I said, initially, my being would be against this because it's not the way I think. But given that knife crime is up so dramatically, serious crime up so dramatically, something needs to be done about it. Of course, the holistic response is much broader and requires an approach through the schools, through local community policing, through economic betterment, through instilling in society aspiration, which has been dumbed out of it by successive governments, a whole array of policies.
People need a sense of hope, and I think that in a lot of communities, people haven't felt that degree of hope for a very long time. And that's a lot of those points that you mentioned about education and economic opportunity. And I think that that's something that really, this kind of approach comes far too late in the process and doesn't actually make us that much safer.
Mark says stop and search is a valuable tool when used properly. I've used it for 30 years in Merseyside. Lots of offenders apprehended and crimes prevented as a result. No crimes of discrimination or anything else when done properly. When you say done properly, do you mean that you find something? Are people cool to just be randomly stopped? David says, as a retired officer, I can tell you that is absolutely a must using stop and search and the drive against crime. There you go. You say about people needing hope. One of my viewers has got in touch saying, is Ben Habib issuing a 2024 calendar or what? Are you? What? Yes? No? Hurry up. Hurry up. The show's about
the answer, sadly, is no.
Well, the viewer there was Paul. You just
Paul? Oh, my goodness. Paul.
Yeah, you have just quashed the hope. Probably not just of Paul, but of a nation. I can hear all of those hearts breaking. No 2024 calendar from Ben Habib. What a bum note to end that on. Look, thank you very much, Richard, for your company. Ben, for yours too.
Thank you.
Guys, guess what? The legend, Nigel Farage, up next. Do not go anywhere. No nights.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. It is going to turn increasingly wet in the south overnight. Clearer skies developing further north, albeit with blustery showers. And we've got colder air coming in as well from the northwest. But before that happens, a number of weather fronts will linger across the southern half of the UK, bringing extensive cloud and increasingly persistent rain, initially for southwest England and Wales. That rain moving into the Midlands, East Anglia, and the south and southeast of England by the early hours. So a wet night to come for many, but further north we've got clear spells, especially for central and northern Scotland, and where that happens, a touch of frost is possible out of the wind. Now, into the start of for Tuesday, we've got outbreaks of rain or showers moving into the north and west of Scotland, as well as Northern Ireland. It's cold enough for these showers to be falling as snow over the hills. Further south, a mild start to the day, but a wet one, with outbreaks of persistent rain through the morning, eventually clearing by the end of the afternoon from the southeast. Clear spells then follow, with some decent spells of sunshine for the central and southwestern part of the UK, but blustery showers continue further north. Those showers also affect the northeast of Scotland into Wednesday. Elsewhere, increasing cloud and outbreaks of rain moving in. The most damp weather affecting the northwest once again. Brightest further southeast after a chilly start. Thursday sees very strong winds from the northwest, gales widely, and some heavy showers.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests, and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on